Renee Hobbs, and thank you so much for the opportunity to participate in this MIL webinar series entitled The Role of Play and Storytelling in Teaching Media Literacy and Information Literacy to Young Children. I am absolutely delighted to join you by recorded video due to time difference, but it's thrilling to see the work that the ASEAN network has done, the leadership that's in place for developing media literacy in Asia. So I'm absolutely thrilled to be part of this program, and thank you so much for the opportunity to join you today. Of course, this topic is so vast and deep that in the few minutes that I have, I can only do it justice by sharing with you an approach that I found very effective in my work with young people and in teacher education. I'm taking you to the website of my book, Media Literacy in Action. I think you can see the screen now. And I'd like to talk a little bit about why I included a focus on storytelling in this media literacy textbook. The inquiry question that I examine here is, why are we attracted to characters and stories? And this is a really important inquiry question in media literacy. I think it's really important for children and teenagers and adults to understand how fictional stories create unreal realities that convey emotional truths. I think it's important for all people to understand the effort that's involved in creating fictional works, right? The art, the technology, and the creativity that is necessary for stories to come to life. I think it's important for students to be able to understand how character archetypes enable stories to be timeless and universal, even as they tell a very particular, specific story. And I also think it's important for students and learners to understand how well-designed narrative structure can create high levels of engagement for readers, viewers, and players. That when the plot and the narrative structure are strong, we get immersed into these worlds that propel our attention and hold it through the entire narrative thread. And finally, I think it's important for every learner to understand about new forms of storytelling, including reality TV, which embeds narrative structures in real experiences and structures characters and conflicts in ways that produce drama out of real life. So I think there's an undeniable reality that stories transform the most challenging and difficult aspects of human experience into pleasure. In fact, all through human history, stories have been a coping mechanism for how we deal with trauma, with conflict, with crisis. And stories help us hold on to our humanity in the face of those very real risks and threats to our integrity. One of the things that I love, one of the activities that I love to do with my students and that I invite my teachers who I'm teaching to do is to select a familiar story that interests you or tell an original one of your own by plotting out the plot points on a chart and making sure that your diagram includes a vertical axis that includes good fortune and bad fortune. Because stories are rooted in characters who get plunged into conflict, where bad fortune occurs and where they have to work their way out of it. So it turns out that students, when they start to plot out the stories that they enjoy or find compelling, maybe something they've seen in the Marvel universe or in some other movie or TV show or video game, that they begin to understand how story structures shape the way we as viewers and readers and players respond to the work. So I invite you to try out this lovely little lesson plan with your students, inviting students to chart out a narrative structure and reflect with their own reasoning and evaluation on why and how stories hold our attention. Another thing that I like to do is invite students to select their favorite media and reflect on why it holds their attention, why they like it. So I invite students to go to the Flipgrid. It's a digital media tool that lets students make short video commentary and respond to each other. Asking questions like, what media text do you like and why do you like it? Describe a key character, explaining his or her personality and actions, and demonstrate the characteristics of one or more archetypes. Archetypes are a powerful tool for looking at how characters address our deepest hopes, fears, and dreams. Learning about the 7 basic plots is an important thing that I focus on in this chapter, to recognize how stories have structure, actually kind of universal structure, even though there are millions of stories. There's some basic structures that apply to most stories that we tell. And thinking a little bit about the role of conflict in storytelling. For my teachers and my older students in high school and college, I like to introduce them to an intellectual grandparent of media literacy named Vladimir Propp. Vladimir Propp was a myth. He studied myths and stories and folklore of the people in the rural communities in Russia during the late part of the 19th century and the early part of the 20th century. And he began to see how the story structures of folkloric tales worked kind of across the vast number of stories that were circulating in culture. And one big insight that I appreciate about Vladimir Propp is his emphasis on the forbidden and the transgressive, that stories actually appeal to us because they are transgressive, because they address the forbidden in our cultural, in the cultural norms of our societies. Here's a quote from 1928. A forbidding edict or command is passed upon the hero. Don't go there. Don't do this. But the rule is violated. And this usually leads to negative consequences. The villain enters the story via this event. So thinking about the way in which stories define the boundaries of what is acceptable and unacceptable behavior in our society, where we get a chance to see what happens when you break the rules, what happens when the social norms are violated. And we get to encounter through vicarious experience, something that we might not hope to ever experience in reality. Now, I invite you to learn more about how Vladimir Propp influenced a generation of media literacy educators and activists by going to my Grandparents of Media Literacy website. This is a crowdsourced tool that allows you to reflect on how the thinkers, readers, scholars, writers, and other people whose work in media literacy has influenced you. It gives you a chance to reflect on that work and how their ideas have left an imprint on your own approach to media literacy. And of course, as you know, media literacy is a transdisciplinary field. So people from a lot of different fields and walks of life have had influence. I invite the members of the ASEAN network to add to this crowdsourced gallery. It's possible for anyone to add an intellectual grandparent. But here's how I want to share with you my experience of how Vladimir Propp influenced me, right? Of course, he analyzed the basic structural elements of Russian folk tales to their simplest structural units. And for me, Prop was influential in helping me understand the role of conflict in storytelling. The way he helped me understand the concept of the villain was really transformative, that villains are not necessarily bad or evil, right? And usually it's not really the character or personality of the villain. It's really just the function of the villain in opposing the hero, right? Serving as that tension, that place of conflict. And I observed that this idea has a lot of relevance to me, especially right now in our polarized political climate, as more and more people are using us versus them framing to create good guys and bad guys. As I write here, this idea has had a lot of value in my relationships with people as I check myself. Whenever I want to blame the bad guy in a particular situation, right? So I invite you to explore the many grandparents of media literacy and reflect on how they influence your thinking about the role of storytelling in media literacy education. Finally, of course, there's a lot of really interesting ways in which learning about storytelling helps us understand its power in our society. So let's take a look at this short video.
Is Willy Wonka's Chocolate Factory actually Dantes Inferno? Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory is a classic children's story. It seems like a delightful romp through a magical candy factory, but is it actually a trip to hell? Now, before we ruin your childhood, it's helpful to know about Dante's Inferno, one of the most famous poems ever written. The author, Dante, is led by a guide through the different levels of hell until he eventually meets Satan, a three-headed beast with bat wings frozen in ice. In the Inferno, Charon, the boatman of hell, ferries Dante across the river Acheron and into the underworld. This is only slightly less disturbing than Willy Wonka's psychedelic boat ride into the factory.
Are the fires of hell a-glowing? Is the grisly reaper mowing? Yes, the danger must be growing, for the rowers keep on rowing, and they're certainly not showing any signs that they are slowing.
And that's not even a metaphor. He's describing a literal descent into hell. In Dante's Inferno, each level of hell is designed to punish a particular sin in a way that's related to the sin itself. Meanwhile, at Wonka's factory, children are also punished according to their sins. Augustus Gloop is so gluttonous for chocolate that he almost drowns in a river of it. Greedy Veruca Salt falls down a trash chute chasing a golden egg. Mike TV is so obsessed with TV that he actually shrinks himself to fit in one. Violet committed theft when she stole the experimental gum that turned her into a giant blueberry. At the end of Charlie's journey through the factory, he gets into a glass elevator and flies off into the sky. At the end of the Inferno, Dante climbs up the body of Satan himself and ascends to heaven. Is Charlie and the Chocolate Factory really a trip to a candy-filled playland, or a warning to children that if they don't clean up their act, they're going straight to hell? What do you?
Isn't that fascinating? So my experience is that students, when invited to think about the connection between traditional stories from cultural heritage and connect those to contemporary media stories, they can go far and fast. So I use this video to invite students to go find and make those connections. And it turns out they always surprise me with what they discover. Now, I just want to make a final observation that reflects my ideas that teachers benefit from examining the question, why are we attracted to characters and stories? And If you want to learn more about how to teach this inquiry question as part of your media literacy program, I invite you to go to the instructor resources guide of this website, mlaction.com. Here I have placed some instructional materials that support high school and college teachers as they learn how to explore some of these media literacy questions, like how do search engines work? How do people get the news? What's the difference between advertising, public relations, and propaganda? There's why are we attracted to stories, but also why do people prefer different kinds of music, movies, and TV shows? And who decides what makes media good? How do people decide who and what to trust? How do media companies make money? Are social media free? Why do people worry about stereotypes? Is my brother addicted to media? And how do people become media literate? These 14 questions are really powerful for structuring any media literacy inquiry. But if you go to the instructor page, what is the password? I forget. Oh, I know what it is. capital M, capital L, capital ACTION. Then you get here, right? And here are some instructor resources for you. For example, a set of downloadable PowerPoint slides, some test and quiz items, and some great discussion questions, right? So I invite you to check out the resources of the Media Literacy in Action textbook. Also visit us at mediaeducationlab.com. This topic of storytelling as part of media literacy involves students making their own stories, but to be an effective media maker, it's always wise to understand more about how stories function in contemporary society. So thanks for the opportunity to invite me to participate in today's program. And I'll say bye now. Have a great conference, you guys. Bye.